follow.
Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I am Ken Coughlan. We got a great episode for you here today. We're kind of back on the main set. We've been spoiled the last few weeks where we've had the Passion Play sets been up, and so we've been filming in front of that, and we haven't had to put all this stuff up, but not so lucky today. But that's okay. It feels kind of nice to be back home, I guess you could say. I'm going to start out today. I'm going to introduce our guest. Why are you looking at me so funny, Mike? Why don't we start with Mike? What do you say?
Hi, how are you today, Ken?
I'm fine and dandy. How you doing, Mike?
Great.
Okay, Mike. This is Mike Hinman, everybody. Mike has been a member. He's been a Trinity for almost. He's been a member of Trinity for almost 20 years. He's been involved with many of the ministries here, from the first website to the youth board, Passion Play, and mission trips with adults, youth, and international trips. He has a master's degree in information technologies. He's worked in the IT field for over 30 years. He's also been married to his wife, Lori, for 30 years. You still got some catching up to do, though, to be on the show as often as she has, though. So,
oh well,
it'll
happen maybe if you're lucky.
And we gotta give Mike a debt of gratitude. Mike, how long have you known that you're going to be on the show today? Are we up to an hour and a half yet?
An hour and a half.
About an hour and a half. Yeah. So this could get fun.
Yeah.
Let's move on here to this lovely lady here who was. How long has it been since you were on the show? 7 days.
Episode.
Yes. This is my daughter, Sarah Coughlan. Sarah was on the show last week. She interviewed me. But now she has to actually be the one doing the talking this time. It's got the roles are reversed a little bit this week, huh? All that fun you had with me last week, yeah, I get revenge this week. This is Sarah Coughlan.
I didn't do anything.
Sarah is a sophomore at Havre de Grace High School here in Harford County, Maryland. She is an actor in theater and film with almost 50 acting credits under her belt. And when she is older, she's hoping to be a voice actress.
This is true.
And you're still not going to do voices for me on camera,
No, I'm still not going to do it.
Do your British accent for us. Come on.
Why? Why do you make me do these things? I don't want
this is
to.
peer pressure. Do it.
This is peer
Do
pressure.
it.
If you didn't know what the topic of the day today was.
There you go. Very good. Thank you. All right. And we have a newcomer here sitting right next to me. And just to add to the intimidation factor, we made him sit next to me. This is Kurt Kreiner. Kurt is 14 years old, almost 15. He is a freshman in high school with a focus on auto diagnostics and repair. However, he's not very popular with me because he said he would not check why my brake light is coming on my truck after we're done with the show today. What good are you? No, I'm kidding.
He made it do that.
He made the brake light come on. He plays the drums here at church and participates in events with the youth group. Thank you for coming on, Kurt.
Sure.
There you go. Delayed reaction.
He
I don't know. Did I actually thank you guys for coming on the show, or just say that you're on the show?
I don't remember.
Thank you both for coming on the show again.
You're welcome. He participates in events.
He participates in events. Look, I just read the bio. He wrote it. You know, I can't
events.
believe you for that. Different events. He doesn't want to own up to what they are.
No. Invents. You said.
Did I say invents?
You said invents the first time.
Events.
No, you corrected yourself at the first time you said invents.
Okay.
I was like, how do you participate in events?
Yeah, you don't abuse me at all. All right, so our topic for the week this week is standing strong under peer pressure. What we wanted to talk about a little bit this week is we kind of wanted to get back into our kind of practical advice type of segment. We varied it up quite a bit lately. But we want to talk a little bit about peer pressure. Obviously, this is a Christian show, so we're going to be talking about it, I think, largely from the perspective of being true to your faith. But I invite our guests, if something else comes up, say whatever comes to mind. That's fine. We're trying to help people out. Peer pressure is not purely a phenomenon that applies to kids and to teens. Obviously, I think that nowadays, especially teenagers, feel an awful lot of peer pressure. Once you get into that junior high and high school age, you do start feeling a lot of pressure from others around you to compromise your values. And in the case of a Christian, to compromise Christ's values. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But it's not solely a phenomenon that's confined to teenagers. And so maybe Mike and I might have something to contribute from an adult perspective. But the other great thing about Mike is he's not just an adult.
I'm not an adult. I've never been put in that category, and I don't ever want to be in that category.
But you work with the teens, right? What do you tell me? What do you do with the teens?
I do Bible studies on Sunday mornings. I answer lots and lots and lots of text messages or phones, or I do mission trips with them. I work on Wednesday nights. Be their friend as an old fart, but try and be their friend and try and teach them how to mentor and live a more Christian, fun life.
And that's why I think I asked Mike an hour and a half ago to be on the show, because I think that you have an interesting dual perspective, I think, that you can bring to it. No pressure, but now you have to bring a dual perspective, both as an adult and then as a mentor to the teens and what you see there. So why don't we start out like this? I'd like to start out by talking a little bit about what peer pressure is. And I'm going to actually start here with Sarah, because before we went on the air, we started having a conversation where you said specifically, can we talk about what peer pressure is? And you wanted to give an example about that. So tell us, share with everybody what you were sharing with us before we went on the air.
A lot of people, when they talk about peer pressure, especially when they talk about anti-peer pressure, they talk about how they define it as doing something when people around you influence you to do something you wouldn't normally do. And that's a little too broad to describe peer pressure, because you could be going to lunch with a group of friends and you could always tend to go a certain way to get to that lunch place, and the rest of your friends could be like, oh, well, can we go this way instead? I want to go this way. And you could be like, oh, all right. That's not peer pressure, but you're still being influenced by a group of people to do something you wouldn't normally do.
What if the alternative way they want to go involves having to build up enough speed in the car, like drive your car 120 miles an hour so you can jump up this ramp and over a snake pit? Now, is that peer pressure?
That's
yeah.
fun. That's fun.
Yeah, no, I prefer to take that way.
If your friends jumped,
Okay, so Kurt's not going to say anything else for the rest of the show, obviously.
if your friends jumped off a cliff, would you?
Only if there's water.
But that's an interesting point, is that we have to keep in mind that what we're really talking about here is the pressure that we feel to do something that we know is wrong. I was actually reading something getting ready for the show that I found interesting, and maybe all three of you guys might have some insight into this, because I don't know if it's true, because I don't have, I'm not a teenager. I have a daughter who's a teenager, but she's my daughter, so she never tells me anything. So that's not true. Actually, we do have a very good relationship, I think.
Thanks.
But I read something that said nowadays, it used to be when, like Mike, when you and I were teenagers, that we would do something and we knew it was wrong, and there was something where we kind of knew it was wrong, so we were kind of thinking, okay, how am I going to get away with this? And this article anyway was saying that more and more so there's a lot of teens today that have lost almost that moral grounding to the point where they don't necessarily think that what they're doing is wrong, and never even that it's not, they don't get to the stage of, oh, how am I going to get, I'm worried about getting away with this, because they just do something because they don't even process that what they're doing is wrong in the first place. I have no idea if that's true or not, but I'm going to field it to you guys to see if you ever experienced anything like that. Not personally. I'm not. I should say that whatever you say on the show is good. You're not getting grounded for anything you confess on the show today.
Thanks. How's that? Well, first of all, I wasn't going to say anything about myself, because I honestly don't want that to be true, but sometimes when I look at what some of the people around me are doing, I'm like, how could you not know this is wrong?
Yeah, I think I've had a few personal friends who have smoked, maybe done drugs, things that aren't typically seen as good, but they sit there and they do these things, and then they just move on with their lives. Like nothing happened, it was normal, it was just part of their daily routine. And I don't think that should be a daily routine.
Specifically that, doing drugs and things like that, I don't understand how you could not know that's wrong. I've spent countless health classes going over why that it's wrong, and exactly why it's wrong to do that, and why you shouldn't. We've had people come in and interrupt our daily classes before, all the way back to elementary school, to give us these informational things about why doing drugs and smoking and things like that is wrong and will harm your body in a negative way.
But there's this huge movement right now from pressure and everything else that marijuana isn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually had an episode on back in October, I think it was, in honor of Red Ribbon Week, where we had Bonnie Wyatt Heisler, who was a drug rehab counselor, and Corporal Dan Petz, who, Sarah, you know, because he's the school resource. I think he oversees the school resource officers in Havre de Grace. And they were talking about, we were talking a little bit about exactly that, actually.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure there in society for, especially of your age, that get on the bandwagon, all right? Mm-hmm. March 20th is coming, all right? That's the 420 day of why is it not, that's when all the protests are, that's when all the smoke-ins are, and everybody's pushing everybody to come out and join them and show that this isn't bad.
So obviously we've talked about, you've talked about seeing people that are doing drugs or whatever it may be. Let's, before we move into more about how I want to talk a little bit about other ways you feel peer pressure and what you can do about it. But I do want to talk about some of the less obvious things that you might feel pressure to. I mean, we could all sit here and do a show that says "Don't do drugs," and I don't think we'd be getting controversial at all. You know, the show would be kind of white noise because everybody's out there saying that. But from a Christian perspective, all right, there are obviously things that the world is going to say it's okay to do that we don't. All right, what other types of things do you think that teens, even adults, are feeling the pressure to do in today's culture that we need to be aware of and we need to be conscious about?
Well, I've actually had a recent experience where um, I was not really putting my faith out there directly, but somebody else had mentioned something about how there's no way that the Bible was true, and they were trying to give proof. And well, I had stated that, in the Bible, there's proof that Pontius Pilate existed. He was a real Roman governor, and he did put a real man named Jesus to death.
Mm-hmm.
And I used that as my evidence to say that, the story's true. And they started bringing up all these lies and false information about how we portray him differently, and we portray him as, the good guy instead of, the tough Roman leader. And I think after a little while, I just kind of left the conversation because it didn't feel right to sit there for, hours on end trying to explain to somebody that something's right when they don't want to believe that it's right.
The one thing about Christianity is that it's a historically based religion. In other words, Christianity, as Paul says, it's like if there was no crucifixion, then it's pointless. What's the point of we have no faith? Our faith means nothing if the crucifixion didn't actually occur. And so I think that because it's based upon a historical event, we should be able to have polite, respectful conversations, just like you would about any other historical event. Did it happen or did it not happen? I had a conversation a while ago with a director. I'm a theater guy, who was coordinating some things that we were, some monologues and that we were going to be doing. In this particular situation, she asked, well, what are your ground rules? And I says, well, the one rule I definitely have is I won't say anything. I won't say blasphemy. I won't do the GDs and the JCs and all that, where people use those as almost like curse words. And so I have had at times had pressure in situations like that where I've had to, basically say, you know what, if that's what this part requires me to do, then I can't do it. And I had a recent play that I directed recently where one of the lead actors I knew from here at Trinity, it was another Christian, and he agreed to step in and do this part for us. And then after I did, I started looking through the script and I realized, oh, there's some things in here that he might have a problem saying, And so I told him, you know what, then don't say it. We can edit that stuff out of the script. So my question is, when you feel pressure to do something that you shouldn't, when everybody else is doing it, so to speak, what do you do? I mean, like you deal with teens an awful lot. Like if somebody comes to you and says, they're really struggling with it because there's a real phenomenon, I think, where people don't fit in. They can almost feel depressed. They can feel like an outsider, and there's a lot. So I don't want to minimize the feeling that I want to be liked by my peers, but at the same time you have to balance it with still being true to your values. What would you say to somebody that came up to you and say, "Hey, everybody's trying to do this"?
You can do the extreme side of it. You could say, well, are they really friends of yours that they're trying to get you to do things that are against your moral compass and what your beliefs are and what you do things? Maybe you should get new friends. Now that can be an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it too is that you ask them, so they're trying to pressure you into doing something, whether it's legal or illegal, but it's something that goes outside of what you believe is right. Into how can you show them from a Christian loving perspective how that really isn't the way you should be doing things? I mean, you could get into materialistic things, you get into all sorts of things that there's peer pressure into doing, from the way you cut your hair to the way you dress to the way what you drive to everything. It's just, and if you really think that person, you want to be friends with them or not, then you have to figure out how to from a biblical perspective. And and don't really come across as a preacher, because that could really throw it even farther into a loop in the wrong direction, because then you could be considered the peering pressured person on that side of it. But you're really showing them how to really think about what they're doing and how things are being done in the right way.
And one of the questions we had last week's episode, we had the Ask the Apologist episode, and one of the questions that came up was how to talk to someone without sounding like you're trying to convert them. I'm not going to give the whole answer I gave again. Watch last week's episode if you want to see it. But one of the things that I mentioned to a lot of people, because nobody wants to feel like they're being preached at. And you're right. It's like you can't just, if you walk up to somebody and say, you're doing wrong, you should be doing X, Y, Z. And how many, let's face it, that's, I think, a big failing in a lot of segments of the Christian church today. I mean, how much bad publicity do we get as Christians on the whole because there's somebody that's just bossy, 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 tell. As opposed to what I tell people is like on a personal one-on-one basis, ask questions. And you can actually lead a conversation in a certain direction just by asking questions. And yet that's also a more polite, respectful way of doing it, and you're showing an interest in what the other person has to say. So.
I think another part of peer pressure with churches is that some pastors, they get so caught up in worldly things and activities that they'll lose sight of the church, and they'll get peer pressured by the world, sometimes without even knowing it, to not preach the true word of God.
Yeah, if the church doesn't, if it starts to look like the world, and I got to be honest, I think you see a lot of that in a lot of denominations today. And I'm not going to. Our job here is, on Trinity Talk Live, is not to call anybody out in particular, so I'm not going to do that. Let's just say in general, I think you do see a lot of churches that are doing that are becoming more and more like the world, and then I don't think it's any surprise that their attendance numbers go down and down and down and down. Because if you're no different than the world, then what are you offering? What are you offering people that they're not going to find anywhere else? Let's try to get as concrete as possible. All right. What types of things help you? Because we can all say, don't give in to peer pressure. And I say, for example, when I have somebody there's a role that I've been asked to play, and it requires me to say something that I are not consistent with my values to say, that I've had to speak up. All right. It's one thing to say, oh, yeah, then speak up and just, don't do that role. It's not easy to do that, though. I mean, what are there any things that we can do to help prepare ourselves for those situations, or to help be strong, to help find the strength in those situations so that we can do what we know we should be doing, and not give in?
I think one thing you can do, especially for like something where it's your job and you're getting paid to do something a certain way, but it goes against your faith to do it a certain way. Say you're getting hired for an acting gig, but the part you're getting hired for is something you don't necessarily agree with, and it's to the point where you think you're not going to be able to do that role because it would be the right thing to do, or maybe the director isn't complying to be, hey, maybe can I not say this? And can I say it differently? And maybe they're not agreeing to that, which can happen for a variety of reasons. Just have faith that God will be there to support you and that you'll be okay in the long run.
Yeah, money should never be your worry when it comes to going against your faith. I mean, especially in a job scenario. I mean, if you were to put money over your own faith to say something in front of maybe people in an acting role, to say something you're not comfortable with that goes against your faith, and just to put that up there for money, that's just not right.
Well, I'll tell you, we're speaking about, acting, and I think, especially in light of the recent Me Too movement, talk about pressure. It's coming to light now how much professional pressure has been put on females in the industry to do things that they shouldn't be doing. This has nothing to do with, this isn't just, Christianity we're talking about now. We're talking about there's been a lot of female actors, producers, whatever. You got to applaud people who have, sounded the alarm on things like that and stepped up and said, no, this isn't right. And this is what's been done to me. But that takes courage. It takes courage to stand up for your values in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, just to say no and basically walk away is hard, because then there's people that are doing that peer pressure to you to do something, and you just say no and walk away. could make things worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's important too, is like not to sugarcoat it. I mean, I think sometimes, especially when we're adults and we're dealing with kids, I think we got to be honest with them, because you want to say, oh no, stand up and do what's right, and then they'll do that and they'll find the courage and they'll stand up and do what's right, and now all of a sudden they go to school the next day and they're getting teased relentlessly over it.
They're not doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yes, it was still the right thing to do, but we got to be honest about the fact that there still could be consequences to this. That it's not just going to all of a sudden be roses the next day. All right. Well, we actually are getting close to the end of the show here, so I'm going to open it up just for one last thing. Anything? The conversation it takes us in whatever directions it takes us, I guess. And it's kind of funny today to see how it's wound around. But I want to give the last few minutes here just to everybody. If there's anything that you want to mention about peer pressure, standing up to it, being strong and faced with it, we haven't gotten to today, now's your chance to fit it in. Mike?
So one of the things, as a sort of an elder in the working with the youth, a lot of the youth and that sort of stuff, some of them, not many, will actually look up to me or to the other things, and we need to make sure that we don't use that to pressure them into doing things that we think are right that don't necessarily agree with them, and use because of our situations. And people anywhere doing that is using that peer pressure for the wrong reasons.
And I think it's also important to not let people put you on a pedestal in the first place as much as you can avoid it. It's like, look, I am far from perfect. And you're right. You got these people that look up to you, and and I don't get me wrong. I want to, especially for my own kids, I want to be that role model that they could look up to. So I'm going to do the best I can. But at the same time, it's like I don't want you putting me up so high, because then I'm gonna screw up. It's gonna happen, and especially when you're dealing with a position of Christian leadership, whether it be somebody who's a pastor or something like that. When somebody like that falls, then how often do people kind of blame Jesus over it? And it's like,
don't be in that position of authority where you use peer pressure for your advantage.
Right. Yeah. Sarah, anything else you want to add?
I wanted to add to the beginning thing, just because I noticed as we were going on, the way we define peer pressure is people pressuring you to do something wrong. It's not necessarily something wrong as much as something that it could be you don't want to do it because it's wrong, but anything you just really don't want to do, maybe because it just makes you uncomfortable, or maybe because you're not in the mood, people will try to get you to go out and do things with them, and they'll make you feel bad if you say, no, I don't really want to go out and do anything right now. Don't let them make you feel bad about stuff like that, because you just don't want to, and that's not something they should get on your case about.
I don't think they should, but they may. But even if they do, you still don't have to do it. You still don't have to do it. So, Kurt, you're last up.
I think one of the biggest things about peer pressure is not just getting out of it or, denying doing something wrong. I think the biggest thing is that, like you said before, you don't do something and then you go to school the next day and everybody's laughing at you because, you're the kid that you're not the cool kid anymore. I think...
Were you the cool kid to begin with?
No. I think one of the biggest parts of peer pressure is having something or someone to deal with it. Like for me personally, if I'm upset, I listen to music. That's how I deal with it. Because the music, I listen to the words and it takes my mind off things. I don't have to worry about anything because when I'm listening to music, I can't hear anything else. That's it. You find something that takes your mind completely off of it, and you don't have to think about it. You just think about what you're doing.
Well, and I'll say my last 2 cents here, and that's just that if you see someone else who has stood up for themselves in that way, and they're the ones that are getting teased for it, be a friend, because lots of times it's real. And, like Mike, you said earlier, it's like, well, maybe these people aren't really your friends. You should go out and get other friends. I know a lot of people say, I don't have any other friends, and so I think especially as Christians, we're supposed to love everyone, and one of the ways you can do that is to be there to support someone who may be feeling that peer pressure or has had the courage to make the right decision, and now they're paying the social consequences for that. You can be there to help them out. So, all right. Well, excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. That was a good show. I really appreciate it. Hey, if you did like this episode, do us a favor. Go ahead and click the like button. There's a thumbs up button right here on the YouTube page. Also, if you could, subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this episode. There's a lot of people out there that are probably feeling pressure that could use some practical advice, and we hope we can give you some today. They might get a benefit out of this episode as well. Trinity Talk Live does have its own Facebook page at Trinity Talk Live Podcast. You go ahead and give us a like on there as well if you are on Facebook. It's a great opportunity for you to also give us feedback, give us ideas for future shows, etc., etc. Comment on the video here on YouTube as well. It's another way you can get feedback to us. All right, really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be back again next week where our episode is going to be called, I got to scroll down here because I wasn't actually using my notes today. Next week's episode is going to be how to help your kids own their faith. It's a really great one. This is one where we're going to be talking to various different parents with kids of different ages and talking about what we can do as parents to help our children internalize their faith as they get older and what types of things might be appropriate at different age levels so that they grow up and they're not just doing it just because mom and dad said so, that they're actually coming to an understanding of their own and they're adopting it for themselves and thinking for themselves about it. Was it that Ben Lander said in last week's message, I think he said something, there is no such thing as a Christian grandparent. That just because if you're a Christian doesn't mean your kid is going to be. You know, everybody's a child of God, an individual. It's a one-to-one relationship, so you got to choose on your own. So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit next week. So thank you very much. We're going to go down the whole row here. Thank you to Mike. Thank you to Sarah. Thank you to Kurt. And now they all in unison said...
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
All right. I
What can
appreciate it.
say except
And
you're welcome.
she keeps doing Disney things. She did it last week, too. You can make me have to pay so many royalties to Disney now. All right. And thank you all for tuning in, and God bless.
In your word we will follow.